You
And
did
we're
it,
recording.
and you didn't hang up
Fantastic.
on everybody. You get extra points.
So welcome to our Silver Wisdom interview with Dr. Carolyn McMakin. We've all been so incredibly excited to welcome her, and today is the day. So Dr. Carolyn, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so stoked that you're here, and yes, and there are two main reasons that I couldn't wait to speak with you. One is that you're such a phenomenal example of a woman really coming into her full power at around the 50-year-old mark and beyond that. And then the second reason is your pioneering work with frequency-specific microcurrents. So welcome and thank you. And if I could just start the questions off with really an idea of what had you been doing prior to this part of your incarnation, and what was it that prompted you to change tack around that as you came up to 50 years old?
That's a great question. So I was 30, I guess I was 39. And my husband wanted to go to chiropractic college. We chose Oregon because we wanted to live in Oregon. And we were going to move our house belongings from San Diego to Oregon. And I had two children, aged 3 and 7. And it was the week before. If you've read The Resonance Effect, you already know the story, but it was the week before we were due, 2 weeks before we're due to move. And I had lunch with my friend Diane, and she said, she looked at me and said, "This is stupid." It's like, excuse me? And she said, "You have wanted to be a doctor for as long as I've known you. And he just wants a job. It's not a passion for him. So you should go to chiropractic college too." And I said, "Great idea, but I have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. And you know how maternal you are when you have children that young. I have a 3-year-old and 7-year-old. How would I do that?" And she said, "I don't know, but it's stupid if you don't." And I went, "Well, point taken, thank you." So that was Saturday. Sunday, I took the children to church with me, and the minister was giving a sermon on vocations. And she said, "If there is a what that you are called to do in your life, what usually stops us is how." And I'm here to tell you that how is not your job. If you have a what that calls you, you do the what and let God worry about how. Ministers would do that, right? It's like, how? And it's, for whatever reason, the conjunction of those two events within 24 hours, this door that I'd closed on myself when I was 27, 28 was the last time I'd tried to do the pre-med to get back into medical school. Just literally went slamming open, and like this light went on in my heart. I was at my girlfriend's house across the street when I was 7, reading her brother's medical school textbooks, right? So I went home and I told Ben, it's like, "Guess what? I'm going to chiropractic college too." And he said, "How?" I said, "Don't know. That's not my job." So literally from that day to this, everything I need shows up. So we moved to Portland, got settled in, started pre-med at Mount Hood Community College, chemistry, physics, all the stuff that I hadn't taken since undergrad, and got not just A's, but the highest grade in the class in everything I took. And just like, they said, "Why don't you go to med school?" It's like, well, I could try. So I went over to the med school, had a chat, and they said, "Yeah, we'd like to have you. So these are you need to transfer from the community college to the university. and start taking more difficult pre-med classes, organic chemistry, biochemistry, stuff like that. And it's like organic chemistry was what terrified me in college and undergrad. So I just never, I gave up going to medical school then because, I mean, my parents had gone bankrupt and moved to Idaho. I was at Santa Clara by myself trying to finish up. There was no way I could go to medical school anyway. And it's like, well, okay. So I was a pharmaceutical rep and had a good profession and good income and flexible hours and all the things I needed. But it's not what I was called to do. And I don't know, this group is probably, it's not a problem, but I had a past life reading one time and the lady said, "Are you interested in medicine?" And I went, "Yeah, you could say that." And she said, "Oh, now you're showing me all the past lives and wish you were a physician." So medicine is, I hear things come out of my mouth that turn out to be true that I have no idea how I know them. It's one of those, right? So anyway, so I did the pre-med at Portland State, aced my MCATs, was in 95th to 99th percentile, 90th, really good scores. And I took the MCATs with 102 fever with the flu that was going around. And then I got my med school interview. There were 6 places for a January class and 3 of them were full. So there were 6 of us for 3 spots. And I got my interview. And normally, as you can tell, interviews are easy. And I said my interview, but that day, they're usually easy, but that day my mouth was like cotton and I was a nervous wreck. And it's like, it's not right, but okay, I'm just nervous. And a lot of the questions during the interview were, how are you going to do this with, at 42, I was 42 by that point, with 2 children this age? And I said, I'm not sure. So, you know, what I need will show up didn't seem like quite the answer. God will take care of the rest was really not the sort of thing you give to a neurologist who's interviewing you for med school. And so it's like, well, all right, I guess I'm going to chiropractic. And so I didn't get one of those spots. And the admissions guy really wanted me. And he said, you should go back to school for another year. And I said, honey, next year I'm going to be 43 with 2 little kids. This is not going to get better, right? So I went to chiropractic college. It was easy. It was so much fun. And so that's how I got there. But when you look at, like, the question you asked was, how did you get there? I had a very difficult family of origin. My dad had a brain injury we didn't find out about until he was in his 50s or 60s. So he was very volatile. And so it was a really stressful environment. But after dealing with him, I don't think there's anybody on the planet that can scare me, right? Of the 4 children, I was the only one that would talk back to him. It's like, you don't get to yell at me. Knock it off. Do you hang up on me? Yeah, I did. And I will if you yell at me again. And he never yelled at me again. So learned about setting boundaries and standing up for myself that way. And then I started in theater when I was 12, children's theater. Was in theater all through high school, all through college, into my 20s in community theater. Never starring roles, but just enough to get comfortable making presentations. And then I was a pharmaceutical rep. So as a pharmaceutical rep, once every 3 months, you have to videotape a presentation in front of your whole sales group. Got used to being videotaped. And I worked in every area of medicine. So if you're a pharmaceutical rep, you have to know as much as your doctors do. I'm talking to doctors. I have to know as much as they do about their area of medicine. So I've worked in every area of medicine except psychiatry and infectious disease, and my bachelor's and master's are in psychology and family counseling. So I would not call on psychiatrists because, well, never mind. But right, they do things with drugs because they're never taught to talk or relate to people, you know. So yeah, so doctors don't scare me. I'm used to working in medicine. And then I went to chiropractic college, and my marriage was difficult. It was my second marriage. And so then I was in 7th quarter out of 12, end of my 3rd year, had 1 quarter left at the end of the 3rd year. And my mom got pancreatic cancer. So I dropped out of school. Of the 4 children, I was the only one in a position to do that. And we went to the Bahamas for immune augmentative therapy. She had enough money by then. She divorced my dad. She had enough money by then that we could go to the Bahamas. And it was great. That part was wonderful. And then I stayed a month, came home. She fell and broke her hip. I flew back. We flew in an air ambulance from Freeport, Bahamas to Sun Valley, Idaho to Ketchum, to go to the orthopedic center there, which is where she wanted to go. She had her hip replaced, stopped the cancer therapy, had a stroke 3 hours after the surgery because the doctors didn't know to put, they do surgery on 28-year-old skiers. They didn't know to put her on anticoagulants. They're just ignorant. So we air ambulanced her to Portland. She died. When is St. Patrick's Day? March. So we started that journey in January, and she died in March, so 3 months, and I was exhausted. And we had her funeral in April or May in Idaho. My husband said, picked a fight. It was a difficult marriage. Picked a fight on the way home from her funeral, and 2 weeks later said, maybe we should get a divorce in August. And I thought to myself, after falling apart and pulling myself back together, I thought, wait. Why are you crying? Why would you want to be married to a man that would do that? And that took care of that. And then I met George Douglas. And so literally, and George Douglas is the one who worked with Harry Van Gelder. Harry's the one that bought the practice in 1946 that came with the machine that was built in 1922 that came with the frequencies. George went down to Ojai, California and worked with Harry and brought the frequencies back, literally written on pieces of binder paper, put them in a drawer, lost track of them. At my daughter's request, mind you, George moved in with us in 1992, and I graduated from school in 93, started my practice in 94. George gave me a Precision Micro, which has got 2 channels, in 94. And in 95, no, it was 94, I was working on somebody's leg, and she had a trigger point in her calf muscle, and I did trigger point therapy with my thumbs. And her pain went from a 3 or 4 up to a 7. And George had been one of my teachers at school, so I called him. And I said, I just did this thing. What did I do? And he said, you've got the blue box there. Put the pads in this configuration and run 18 hertz on channel A and 62 hertz on channel B, and see what happens. And I said, what's that for? He said, well, I'll tell you if it works. Okay. So I did that. Her pain went from 7 back down to a 1. And she left happy. The trigger point was gone. The pain was gone. I called George and said, what did I just do? And he said, well, that's the frequency to stop bleeding. And I said, what frequency? The frequency from Harry's list. What list? And we started using them the next, probably a month later, to treat myofascial pain patients. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just loving the story, but I realize that there'll be some of us here that have an idea of what frequency specific microcurrent is,
And
and
some don't.
some will have absolutely no idea.
Well,
So I
that's
wonder, can you give us like just an idea of what it is in a nutshell?
well, we just started that part of the transition actually, because that was the beginning of frequency specific microcurrent machine with 2 channels and a list of frequencies. So in 1995, we started working, and 95, we started working with my patients. By then, I had given a lecture at Portland State on fibromyalgia. And once you make up 50 overhead projector slides and read 85 papers, you're the local expert. So, so I started getting this difficult crowd of patients. And George said, well, let's see if Harry does still work on these patients. So George would stand at the counter with the list, and knowing what he knew about Harry and using a kind of a method of dowsing, he'd tell me what to run. And I'd put the sticky pads on patients, and they started to get better. And we did this all through 95, and virtually the whole patient population was the 5% of people that nobody else could fix. And the frequency response and George's suggestions, basically the ones that worked, taught us about how the body worked. So in 96, I got so busy that I didn't have time to work only 3 days a week, taking half a day per patient with George. So I did my normal patient flow now 5 days a week instead of 3. And in 96, we started treating myofascial pain. No nerve, we didn't treat nerve pain yet, just muscle pain. And I said, we were doing things that were impossible. So I said, I got to find out if this is real. How much of it is placebo because the walls in the clinic are pink and I'm nice, it's how much of it is real. What am I doing with my hands? And how much of it is me? And how much of it is these frequencies? Are the frequencies really doing what we think they're doing? So 97, we were going to teach it in January. And one of my preceptors at the clinic was a naturopathic student. So she spread the word out. She's like a little bumblebee. She's just amazing. And so we did our first class in January of 97. But about 5 or 6 of them bought machines from the local distributor. And by June, we knew it was reproducible. So then I kept teaching it because it would be immoral not to. And 97, I taught 4 classes in Portland. And one of my students was a lady from Chicago and one was a lady from Florida. So the next year, I did 4 in Portland, 1 in Chicago, 1 in Florida. And 98, we figured out how to treat nerve pain. So the way the frequencies work is on this list, there is a list of pathologies, like inflammation is a not normal state, a pathology that affects a tissue that makes it dysfunctional in a certain way, right? So if you get inflammation in a nerve, that creates nerve pain. If you have inflammation in your heart, that creates heart disease. If you have inflammation in an ovary, you have an ovarian cyst, right? So then so that was the basic format we learned in 96, was that basic principle. And then everything else has been mileage. In 99, January, I was working had an offer to go work in a medical pain management clinic. And I treated my first fibromyalgia patient who had fibromyalgia from spine trauma. It is the worst pain profile of any fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia is a full body pain condition that is a neuroendocrine condition. So it's the nervous system and the endocrine system get completely out of whack for some reason, usually associated with pain. With this group, they get a spine injury or neck injury, and after that they have full body pain that's between a 5 and a 10. Average is a 7.4 when we collected the data from 99. So I had 25 of these cases by December of 99. And I talked to a colleague of mine in January who came from England. He's at the Chiropractic College in, is it Brighton? Brighton? Yeah, I think it was Brighton. Anyway, or that Bristol. Anyway, Chiropractic College. And he, was telling him the story. He said, hey, we're going to do a conference in January on spine trauma. Would you like to present? It's like, sure. And that was when we had 12 or 15 of those cases, because it's extraordinary. You hook them up at neck and feet, and 60 minutes later, they're so stoned they can't talk, and their pain is completely gone. It's like, what? And then probably October, somebody that had come to, that I'd met through just treating myofascial trigger points, was a physiatrist at NIH, and I'd published a paper on myofascial trigger points. He found me, came to get treated. We had some success, and so he invited me, called in October, said, hey, I had a speaker cancel for February. Would you come? I said, absolutely. So I did these slides for the presentation in England, figured out how to make PowerPoint. I'd never done that before. And then had this presentation at the National Institutes of Health in the main building, 2 research folks that, sitting there like that, white coats, pocket protectors, glasses. And then Jeff Bland, who has a Functional Medicine International Symposium, invited me to lecture in May. Their topic was energy medicine, and I was pretty much the only game in town that actually did energy medicine. Now, when I was at NIH, I told the group, it's like, look, I've done this 25 times. They come in at a 7, 8, 9, and they leave it a 0 to a 1, and absolutely nobody's going to believe it until I get some data. And there's no way to get data. You guys are the best scientists in the world. Somebody tell me what on earth we're doing. And it's like, Terry Phillips walked up and said, you send me a spot of blood on blotter paper and I can tell you what they had for breakfast. And I said, okay. So in March, I got the blotter paper, called a patient that I knew had fibromyalgia that we could not help 2 years before. Asked her, would you mind if I poked your finger and we could do this treatment on you? She said, I'm in. And I'm headed out the door literally to the airport to go lecture at Jeff Bland's International Symposium. And I get the data back from NIH. And it's things like interleukin 1, 6, 8, TNF alpha, interferon gamma, CGRP. It's like, I have no idea what these are or what they do. And this was 1999. It's not like you could Google it. Like Wikipedia didn't exist. I just had gotten email. Like it was, so I get to the hotel in Phoenix to meet Jeff Bland. And yeah, Ingrid, I'll get to that. It's coming. Yeah, no, it's, you watch. This is deliberate. So I get to the Phoenix, meet Jeff Bland as he's coming out of the hotel. And I said, Jeff, look, I just got this data from Terry Phillips at NIH. And I showed him the piece of paper. Now, Jeff Bland is a PhD in biochemistry who worked with Linus Pauling, right? So he's founded the Institute for Functional Medicine. He founded that whole movement. So he doesn't impress easy. And he looked at the data and his hands started shaking. He's like, wow, all right then. He said, those levels of endorphins will get somebody's attention. I said, I don't know what these things are. Who do I call? I have to present it tomorrow at 2:00. And he said, well, you call Michael Ruff. He works with Candace Pert at GW in Washington. And they wrote the book, Molecules of Emotion, and cytokines are his field. I went, okay. So I called Michael Ruff. And I said, Dr. Ruff, Dr. Bland said to call you, this is Dr. McMakin. And I have this data, and I don't know how significant it is. So he said, okay, what are the numbers? He was very gracious. And I said, well, interleukin 1 goes from 399 down to 26. And there was this long silence. He said, what time frame? I said, 90 minutes. He said, that's not possible. Cytokines are hard to change, and when they change very slowly. I said, no, they're not. They all change like that. He said, excuse me? And I told him the numbers on all the other ones, interferon gamma, CGRP, all of them. And he said, who did your data? I said, Terry Phillips, the same guy that does your data. And he said, well, he's the best in the world. So he said, I have no idea what you're doing, but so that was actually the beginning of our credibility. And to answer Ingrid's question, if those of you that can see the chat, it was when you look at Rife, right? Raymond Royal Rife did frequency medicine. He made 2 mistakes, huge, that got him dead, actually. One was he didn't teach. And 2 was he treated cancer. Now, the good news was he treated cancer, but he didn't teach anybody. He had one colleague with one of his microscopes and one list of the frequencies, and that's it. And they were both in California. So when the FDA or the AMA or whoever it was came in and busted in his door one morning, they destroyed his microscope, they confiscated his records. He wanted to wait until he had 1,000 cases of terminal cancer that were cured. And he was up to 700 before he published it. So 3 mistakes. He didn't publish, he didn't teach, and he treated cancer. So my first step was teach, publish, lecture, and an awful lot of people who develop this kind of technology, their interest is in commercializing it. So they want to sell it. My metaphysical background is the only way to keep something is to give it away. So I've been teaching it. By the time I taught it for a year, it was too late to patent it. I'd been teaching it for years. And medical techniques are not patentable. This is medicine, not, now dentistry, there's an exclusion. But in medicine, if you develop a new procedure that allows you to do an appendix or an open heart surgery in a better way, you can teach but not patent that technique. You can patent the gadget or the device that is required to do that technique. But I didn't make the device, and the frequencies and the clinical stuff are not patentable. So one thing led to another, thanks to Jeff Bland. And in 2003, Metagenics sponsored me to go national in the US. So instead of 6 seminars, I had a national sales force promoting them. And we were doing 10 to 12 seminars in the US for 30 to 50 people. And December of 2002, I'm on the phone with the president of Metagenics, the CEO of Metagenics, and his legal team, his FDA lawyers. And I tell them what we're going to do, and their response was, you can't do that. And the president of Metagenics said, I have to go. John, I don't need to hear, we can't do it. I need to know how to do it. I have to go now, figure it out. And he hung up. So the lawyers said, you have to have 2 completely separate corporations. one for the devices distribution and one for the seminars. You can say anything you want about seminars as long as you don't make medical claims. The devices are TENS devices. Now, at that point, the man who made, 2002, the man that manufactured the old blue box was retiring. He called me and said, "You're the only one that is selling these things, and George is the only one I'm going to work with. If you don't buy this company, I'm going to shut it down." And it's like, well, I can't buy it. I was telling my dad the story. By then, our relationship was much better. And he said, "Well, I just sold my business. I got a bunch of money in the bank. How much is it?" I said, $110,000, and most of that's inventory. And he said, "Okay, well, I'll just write a check." So George went down, spent 3 months in California, learned how to build the machines, and then he and my dad put it all in a moving truck and moved it up to this building in Newburgh, just south of Portland. So my dad owned that company. I owned frequency-specific seminars. So between December, I think it was December 10th, when we had that conversation with the lawyer, and December 31st, January 1st, actually, my attorney formed 2 completely separate corporations with 2 completely separate ownerships. I didn't have my fingerprints anyplace on the device. And in the United States, I can say anything I want. What is that? The First Amendment. As long as I'm a clinician sharing my clinical results with other clinicians, I'm good. The devices are devices. I don't say, there is not a single picture of a single device in the seminars, right? So I tell people what I have observed as a response to the frequencies. And these days I finally figured out I have to talk about how to think about it. And the other thing is, having been in pharmaceutical sales for so long, they're not evil. I mean, the profit motive and the corporate ill intent is pretty evil, but physicians in general, I learned that medications are there because not everybody wants to eat properly and go for a walk, and they'd rather take a pill. And I'd had enough medical procedures at that point that I knew that there's a place for medical therapies. That's just how that works. So I didn't have any adversarial relationship with medicine. So you just have to live by their rules, which is you have to publish papers. So that's what I did.
Fantastic. I don't know if this is a question that you would want to answer, but one of the things that some of us have been talking about with regard to microcurrents and frequencies is this idea of how disrupting they can be potentially for the mainstream.
Yeah, no, it's really been interesting because I kept a low profile. So here's the thing. By the time I came above the radar with the NIH data, I already had 1 published paper. I'd made connections by lecturing at medical meetings. I was treating nerve pain, and the cytokine data is outrageous. It's not just impressive, it is impossible. So I had this batch of patients that is untreatable and incurable. And I have data that is impossible. Nobody on the planet can reduce all of the inflammatory cytokines by 10 and 20 times in 90 minutes. It can't be done. And the study was not, it was published as a collected case report. It took us 5 years to get it published as a collected case report. The design sucked, but the data was really good. And then substance P, so the second frequency is the spinal cord. Substance P comes down by a factor of 10 times in 90 minutes as the pain goes to 0. That's impossible. And substance P is manufactured in the spinal cord. So I have data that says, that we are indeed reducing inflammatory cytokines. raising endorphins, so that explains why they're so stoned they can't talk, and that we are treating the spinal cord. So that got me started. It gave me something credible to lecture about. And I could go to a meeting, and a medical meeting. I didn't lecture to chiropractors. I don't lecture to any esoteric groups. I won't lecture to the energy medicine folks. I absolutely am determined that this therapy be medically credible by playing by their rules. So as we went along, and thanks to Metagenics, we had then 1/3 of our practitioner base, 1/4 were now MDs. And they start doing things that are freaking impossible. Liver disease, liver enzymes, pancreatitis, I mean, Crohn's, ulcerative, it's just easy. Like, they're just easy. Nerve pain is easy, right? It's just autoimmune disease, atrial fib, not just doable, but easy. And it's not going to be permanent, because you have to fix what's wrong with it and what caused it. So it's a whole different way of thinking. But because you can't just whine about, they're not nice to me, they won't let me in the club. No, we don't do that. It's a girl thing, which I think you guys will understand. It's like, we are going to do your way and beat you at your own game by being patient and following your rules and beating you at your own game. And then so I was treating yeah, I know, isn't that satisfying? So I was treating a patient in a rather arrogant, obnoxious internist, pain specialist office down in California someplace. One of my practitioners worked there, and he said, well, I have a patient. And it was a 40 and 10. It was a fibromyalgia patient. It was like, yeah, this is easy. So I'm sitting in there treating this patient, and this doctor comes up. Now, he's used to being on the podium in medical meetings, and he comes up, he leans against the door, and he said, I don't think that I believe in what you're doing. And I said, well, fortunately, the efficacy of what I'm doing does not rely on your belief. It's going to work whether you believe in it or not. And that I owe to 16 years of talking to medical physicians and educating them, and 20 years of dealing with an Italian, argumentative, verbally difficult dad. It's kind of like, you can't scare me, jackass, you know? So that's how it developed. And we finally got the cytokine paper published. And then I just kept publishing case reports. So in 2005, I met David Simons. By November, we started corresponding. His wife had died in 2004. 2005, met David. By November, in June, he reviewed my paper at his house in Atlanta. It's the first time I'd met him. We'd corresponded because I'd published 2 papers on myofascial pain at that point, and met at his house. He reviewed the cytokine paper because he's on that editorial board. We continued our correspondence. November, he announces, he asked me, how did you start FSM? So I told him the story in emails, and he's deaf as a post, so you had to communicate by email. And his reply was, you see, this is why I've fallen so deeply in love with you. Excuse me? I beg your pardon? Huh? So that progressed. We met in December in Los Angeles. He got me a separate hotel room, and he picked me up from the airport. You guys, I think this group will like this story. Picked me up at the airport from baggage. We get into the car, and he says, so if this weekend goes the way I want it to go, we have to have some ground rules. Now, David Simons has published 240 peer-reviewed papers. The first of them were in aerospace medicine. The last 120 were in myofascial pain and trigger points. He wrote the foundation textbooks with Janet Travell in myofascial pain, wrote 3 textbooks and another 3 or 4 special interest books. So he's kind of like God, you know, in the myofascial pain world. And so here's David Simons in the parking lot at LA airport telling me we have to have ground rules for this weekend. And I had, dude, you live in Atlanta, I live in Portland. I do not need this relationship. So my idea was this weekend was going to be, we weren't going to do this thing that he wanted to do. And so we get in the parking lot and he said, okay, ground rules. Tell me about your relationship in Portland. I went, yes, this will be the deal breaker. So I said, well, George and I lived together for 8 years, broke up for 4 years, got back together after my stint in 2004. And now we live separately. He lives in Newburgh, I live here. He comes over Saturday, we spend the night. Sunday morning, noon, we have breakfast, he goes home. He said, okay, that's not to change in any way. Excuse me? And then David was 82. Good, I'm glad you're laughing. Nobody looks horrified. That's a good thing. So David says, I'm 82. I think at that point I was 59. And he said, women your age that partner with men my age spend the last years of their life taking care of their husbands who are ill or dying. I am going to stay in Atlanta where my medical care and my support system is and my staff is. And you will stay in Portland and you will not be allowed to take care of me as I am terminal. I will hire that done. Your work with FSM is too important. Okay, so we go to the beach. George is completely aware that I'm having this weekend with David. And needless to say, the weekend went the way that David wanted it to go. And so January, he said, I want to get married. David, you have 2 foundations, 4 children from your first marriage. I have 2, 3 corporations and 2, this is no. And he said, no, not IRS legally married. You do shamanic journeys. Let's have the shaman marry us. I want a ceremony. I want my community to know that I'm with you. And it's like, so George came over after David and I had that conversation. And I don't think I've ever told this group to this story to the non-FSM group, but it's really a great story, I think. So George comes over, we have dinner, and I said, David wants to get married. And George said, oh, that's great. Like, not a heartbeat. That's great. You've always wanted to get married. I've never wanted to get married. You want a ring, you want a ceremony. I'm not going to do that. He could do that. This would be great. And then he said, oh, you know, ceremonies change things. What if it changes us? And I said, well, you know, I have loved you one way and another for what, 15, 20 years. I will continue to love you no matter what our relationship looks like. And he said, okay. So David came in June. I had 1 weekend in between 2 back-to-back seminars. We planned the wedding for that weekend, June 18th. And the weeks that I was home, months before, we arranged, you know, the tent and the platform and the catering and blah, blah, blah in my backyard. And it's not a huge backyard, but it was nice. And so David arrives. I get home from my seminar on Monday. David arrives on Tuesday. We get him new hearing aids, proper modern ones, on Wednesday. And then his plan, he wants to go down and meet George on Thursday. They've never met. And George said, okay. So it's an hour and a half drive south of Portland. And now David was on the cover of Life magazine at the age of 35. He was the first human to see the curvature of the earth from space. They sent him up in an aluminum phone booth on the end of a high altitude balloon in a jet pilot's suit. And if you find the issue of Life magazine from September 2nd, 1957, you will see David on the cover. He has met presidents, kings, lectured all over the world, right? Nothing intimidates the man. And we're driving to Newburgh in this hour and a half drive, and he's like, what should I talk to him about? I want him to like me. I could talk to him about physics. No. Oh, I know. So he strategizes all the way down. We get to Newburgh. He asks George how to build the machines, like how he does this. And George gives him, they're just adorable. As different in temperament and personality. George is a theosophist, for those of you. So it's kind of sort of a Zen Buddhist thing without the religion part. And philosopher, physicist, introvert, and then there's David. And so they go off and walk around, and the other employee is an engineer named Karen, and Karen said, how did you do this? I have no idea. So they get back around, and David said, I want a picture. So I have a picture over there on the wall of David over my right shoulder, George over my left shoulder, and they're right both, I'm leaning up against both of them, so they're that close. David had really long arms, so he is reaching around, and you can see his hand around George's shoulder.
Wow.
And for the women, it's nice that it's all women. You will understand, I hope. I had two men who loved me, both of them in their own way, completely beyond reason, like beyond reason. And I didn't have to live with either one of them. You get that? So David's, yes, yeah, right. So David lived in Atlanta, and I was traveling so much that I just switched from United Airlines, changing planes in Chicago, and switched to Delta, changing planes in Atlanta. And anytime I traveled to the East Coast, which was twice a month, I would change planes in Atlanta, go stay with David for 3 to 5 days, turn around and come home. If I'd lived with him, I would have killed him. It was just, we were flint and steel, but it was just delicious. It was wonderful. Yes, ma'am.
Wow. Oh, what an awesome story.
Great.
And and I'm sort of really aware of the time and how at some point soon I want to open it.
I warned you.
But I know. And I'm already thinking maybe we can do part 2 at another point. But there's a question you mentioned, shamanism there, and I don't remember seeing shamanism in your book, The Resonance Effect. And one of the questions that I'd written down is, and I'm also aware there's a great question from Deborah there, but I really just want to ask you, how far can we go, do you think, with frequency specific microcurrents? Like, it seems like on a physical level amazing, but can it take us into realms of the mind and the soul? And then I've got the stem cell question here, and like, where can we take
sure about, but my hobby is neurology and immunology. So I did a presentation. I'll send you the slides and you can send them to your group if you want. I did a presentation on consciousness and the human experience. So we experience consciousness and our spiritual connection, our spiritual reality, right? We experience that in our bodies. There is a part of our mind that is intuitive, intellectual, but it's all governed in the brain effectively, right? And the endocrine system. So the way we experience this is allowed or amplified by certain neurologic functions and interfered with by others. So the stress centers in the limbic system in the brain create a fight or flight central sensitization, depending on, I think, past lives, depending on childhood experiences, depending on random experiences up through adulthood. So if you were molested or raped or lived in an abusive household, especially below the age of 7, the threshold for stress response in this midbrain is set at that age, and it's set at a lower threshold because there is always a tiger that is about to kill you. You learn that when you're 5 and your brothers do their thing, and that threshold is set lower. So now, or let's say you get molested or raped by a man wearing a blue shirt and a certain cologne when you're 8 or 9. Now, the memory has faded. You have no conscious awareness of it. But the patient gets on a train or the tube or a bus or goes into a department store, and there is one person that walks by wearing the same cologne that the man wore, and a different person that goes by wearing a shirt that's the same color. And then you're in the furniture department of the department store, and the couch is arranged, right, in the furniture department the same way. And the midbrain does not communicate with your conscious mind well. It just sets all of the survival systems in place automatically. You don't get to vote. So your vagus nerve, stress centers go up. There is a tiger. We gotcha. We will get you to survival. The vagus nerve goes down. So all you know is that your chest gets tight, your digestion's upset for that day, and you feel rather anxious and you really want to get out of that store or the bus or the tube or the wherever you are. Some people, it's something as, for me, for some people, it's something as simple as the sound of a doorknob, you know, the click that the doorknob makes when it opens. Patient, that's enough to set somebody off if the violence that they experienced happened preceded by the click. The brain is taught. Okay, so when you're in that stress system, your communication with your higher self is interfered with, because we'll get to God later. Right now, there's a tiger. What are you thinking, right? So there are frequencies that turn the limbic system down, not off, but can repair that stress response. There are frequencies that turn the vagus back on. So when the vagus is back on, 80% of the vagal fibers go up into the brain and report stress, infection, or physical trauma. Okay, so with the vagus now on, telling the brain, hey, we're okay, and the frequencies have turned the limbic system down, those stress responses down, then we turn the vagus on. And so when the stress response tries to jack back up again, the vagus goes, dude, what are you upset about? We're fine down here. Chill out. So it appears that when we treat PTSD or when we treat the limbic system in the vagus, we can modify that. So, I mean, those stories go on for hours, so we won't do that here, but that's the reality of it. We developed a protocol. One of my practitioners developed a protocol in 2005, and we've been treating PTSD since 2005. It's just not that hard. Like their PTSD scores go down from non-functional to going back to school, playing with their kids, playing baseball, sleeping, reduced or off medication. I mean, it just, when I say it's not that hard, and then there's actually a frequency protocol for, once again, it's really lovely dealing with this group because this won't sound weird, but one of my patients came up from Los Angeles. We treated her for fibromyalgia, sent her home, and she was all recovered. She came back 3 or 6 months later, walked into the office and said, "It is like I have got a target on my back. When I got home, I was great for 2 weeks. Then I sprained my ankle. My son broke his arm. My husband lost his job, and this and this and this happened. It's like I've got energetic cooties that just live on the emotions of fear, pain, and upset. And I think you can find frequencies that will do that." I went, not really my strong suit. And I don't develop frequencies, but I have a naturopathic student in the office who is very good at dowsing or muscle testing for frequencies. And he's clairvoyant. So your concept is not going to be foreign to him. So, Ryan, why don't you and Ryan go into room 4 and see what you come up with? So an hour later, they came back with this list of 6 or 7 frequencies for these energetic entities. And it's as close as we come to being able to do an exorcism. So I've had clairvoyant people watch while we run it. So I had an office manager that was mildly clairvoyant. He could see the blue etheric field. And with the patient's permission, I had David come into the office and at treatment room, and he just leaned against the door and watched. And he's doing this with his head. And I said, we got out in the hallway. I said, what? He said, what were you doing? I said, no. What were you seeing? He said, there was black stuff, balls and little squiggly things, or black shit flying out of the patient's field. I said, yeah, that's nice. Where did it go? Right? So before I teach things, I use them for up to a year and make sure that they're safe for the patient and the practitioner. So where did these things go? Are they sitting on the ceiling in room 3 waiting to jump on me? And he said, no, they went out the back wall. I said, great. He said, I wouldn't want to be in the bar next door. And I said, well, that's their problem, not mine. So there we go.
Wow.
Yeah. So in that, and it worked. We used it on her. So when I teach those, I tell that story and I say, the place you use it is on patients where their history makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Or the patient that is like, nobody has this much. That's just not sensible unless the patient is deliberately stupid or self-destructive. Jet fighter pilots, yeah, that is not energetic. That is dopamine. So another conversation. And 100% of the time it helps. I use it on myself about twice a year. I mean, energetically, my sister is a trained clairvoyant with the Berkeley Psychic Institute. And as I started working with very difficult patients, some of whom are what you would know as energetic vampires, I would end up at the end of the day just nailed. And I learned to call my sister, and over the phone, she could help me get unhooked. And over time, she said, it's not them, it's you. So this is how you clean up your field and protect yourself. So she trained me. And then when I started teaching nationally in 2003, I was doing sessions with her twice a month. So I'd get nailed, right? People want to know what I know, so they cord in here. People want to see what I see, so they cord in here. People are afraid, so they cord in at the solar plexus. And eventually I just learned how to protect myself thanks to her skills and George's help. And it's just from an energetic standpoint. And then if you've read the book, you know that when I had the open heart surgeries, I mean, I died. Well, once you've been dead, nothing scares you. It's like, what's the worst that could happen? I've been dead. It's not that hard, right? The shamanic journeys helped. And the meditations with the healing group that George took me to, we chant in Sanskrit. Harry was there. I had that amazing experience during the meditation where literally everything disappeared. There was no thing. All of a sudden, like, I've got my eyes closed, but the walls disappear, Earth disappears, all of a sudden I'm out where there is no thing. There are not even stars or planets. It is just a gossamer web of light and sound that you can't hear and light you can't see. It's just that. So it's, yeah. So, and it's all—
Carolyn, I mean, talk about captivating.
Sorry.
Would you mind going through some of the chats and seeing the questions, because there are some great questions there.
Let's see. Healy is somebody asked me about that. Yes,
we were going to leave the devices.
Yeah,
the
devices. The Healy is a single channel, not two channel, and it uses frequencies from some gentleman named Nuno Nina. Time Waver and Healy are related. 2-3 years ago, I asked them, hey, can you make this 2-channel? So there was, past tense, a device called the Mac Healy. And in the process of figuring out the marketing of that, they decided to take Healy as a multi-level marketing system. And when it got to the US, it completely exploded. And I'm listed on their board. So the Healy practitioners, God bless them, are making claims about Healy being able to do FSM. And it uses Nuno Nina frequencies. For some reason, Time Waver is not, and Healy are not claiming that association with him. So I'm not sure what that's about. But because of the regulatory exposure, the Healy is a device. They do not separate device and frequencies. So because of the regulatory exposure that Healy has created, we've pulled the Mac Healy, and Time Waver is going to have to release that as a prescription device. We can't sell it MLM in its current configuration. So not bad. I've finally heard, I was skeptical about the Healy. I don't trust any device that claims to do the diagnosis for you. It's no, just no. Best diagnostic device is right here, thank you. And in between all of your ears, not mine. So that part of it, yeah, right, whatever. So I finally began hearing some really good reports about the Healy and its positive response. So I know it does something, it just isn't FSM. Cancer cells, we don't treat cancer. Sorry. I mean, I just don't. Harry treated cancer all the time. I knew at least 15 or 20 cancer patients that Harry Van Gelder had healed in his lifetime, and he treated the cause. So concussion, the adrenals, the emotion, the immune system, vitamin D, vitamin A, and sometimes it's just karma. It's just your time and your way to die. And even Edgar Cayce couldn't fix that. So I can make you more comfortable. We can treat the nausea from chemo. We can treat radiation side effects. And we go about that. No. When you lecture about FSM, do you teach the self-protection techniques? Privately. So if you think about a class of 40 people, or now that we've started doing it live stream, 76 people, some of them are medical physicians at Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic and NIH and private medical practices. And some of them are fundamentalist Christians who don't believe in spiritual stuff anyway, and it's all of the devil. And it's like, so I don't even go there. In this group, I'm really comfortable talking about that. You guys all know where your field is. And so far, almost everybody is really respectful. There's somebody bouncing off of this part of my field, and it's like, it's okay. They're not intrusive. They're just curious. And so this information is not unusual to them. We have my sister and has taught classes for us before as post-seminar workshops. And we have one other practitioner that taught a seminar, 3-hour workshop this year on energetic protection and sensitivity and how all that works. But that is a life learning lesson. I was raised Catholic, recovered, became more spiritual, then I did what you would call New Thought or science of mind kind of stuff, and then progressed from that back to the Catholic Church for a while, and then progressed from that to shamanic journeys, Harry first, and then shamanic journeys. So yeah, it was really quite fun. Yes, Tanya, cancer is a symptom. Two people cannot access empathy, love, relationship, anything because of childhood PTSD. Yeah, it's honestly, I know it's hard to believe given our current approaches to PTSD, but it's just not that hard. It's just not that hard. It takes 8 sessions. They're 2 hours apiece. We don't have to talk. You don't have to do anything. Not too many people come apart or cry. Usually it's when you get to the emotional frequencies and you run them in the wrong order. So if you take out grief, and the grief is like a socially acceptable emotion, when some doctor didn't listen to you and your child died of a genetic disease and the doctor didn't listen. So my students were treating this woman in a class. She was another student, and they treat her for grief, and she starts just crying like waterworks. And I saw it. I knew it was happening because anyway. So I walked over and I switched it. I said, try this. And I switched to the frequency for anger. Waterworks stopped. And she started to relax. Anger ran for 10, 15 minutes. Resentment ran for another 5. She has another son with the same genetic illness. The 2 terror frequencies ran for 5 minutes apiece. Then we ran grief. She was fine. So because the frequencies so far always do what they are alleged to do, whether that's what you think they're going to do or not, that's where I've learned how it is that we operate. Before you can do anything for any emotional state, you have to tell the limbic system to sit down and be quiet. So we have frequencies that turn it down, and then you turn on the vagus, and the vagus will help keep the limbic system quiet as long as everything really is okay. And sorry, somebody just, and so you quiet down the limbic system, and then accessing the emotions in some healthy way, whether that's tapping or crying or whatever you want to do. There you go. So yeah, it's totally doable. It's totally doable. Ernest Holmes, thank you. I couldn't remember his name. All right. Well, the tiger. Who is that?
That's Ingrid.
That is a great picture. Oh, thank you.
So Deborah has asked, is there anything in your experience that can't
I was just going to tiptoe out, which is why I switched off what I thought was leave when it was actually just the video. Thank you so much. Sorry, Franny, can I just say thank you so much?
You're welcome.
A marvelous session.
So
really interesting. And I'm very much akin to a system that I use, but
yeah,
this is.
By the way, before everybody has to go, I need to get back to Francesca so I can finish this other thing, but we are doing a seminar. We're supposed to come to London live in September, and that's not going to be possible, obviously, because, well, you don't even want to go to the US problem. And so we are going to videotape a 5-day live stream and live stream it to our London and whoever one else. So if some of you are practitioners, it's a 5-day that I teach all by myself, but it's a compression of the 2 3-day modules that the 2 3-day modules that we've put together. So I'm going to take the 6 days, compress them into 1 day. Take out the redundant material, compress them into 5 days, and do that, and then live stream it to London. Kevin's going to be up in the middle of the night. so that he can do the chat so if you have a physical therapist, medical physician, osteopath, acupuncturist, anybody that is allowed to use electrical stim on patients. So have them sign up for the course. It's on our website, frequencyspecific.com. And it is really just like the best. So Francesca, I think I need to get back to you, and I don't know how to switch you from Ingrid to you.
If I talk, I should pop up.
Oh, there we go. Got it. I love the tiger.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you so much. Bye.
So hands-on healing. Yeah, none of the places are strange, darling. So what did you, oh, Francesca, you were asking what?
Yes, Deborah had asked, is there anything that you think FSM can't treat?
I can't put tissue back that is not there, and I don't believe it is safe, either politically or medically, for us to treat cancer. So I can't put tissue back that's not there. If your spinal cord is transected, I can't make you from a quadriplegic into a normal person. Can't do that, not with this technology. Cancer, number one, if I do something out of ignorance or just bad luck that makes your pain worse, it's just pain, right? It may affect the quality of your life temporarily, but it will not affect your life. If I do something out of ignorance or just bad luck that makes your cancer worse, so we do not treat cancer. It's not moral. It's not ethical. Politically, it's self-destructive and stupid, because the best way to get any treatment methodology shut down in the United States especially, but Germany as well, is to not only use it and be successful, God help us, and use it and be successful and then talk about it. So we don't talk about it. We have a slide specifically on that. If you treat cancer with this and you are successful, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to see it in print. I don't want to see it on the internet. I don't want to see it in an email. You want to do it in your practice, you do your thing. But don't put my name on it. The risk is just too great. And morally or ethically, I wouldn't mind starting with mice or rats. But no, but strokes, yeah, can't put tissue back that's not there. Spinal cord, if they cut a nerve, they cut a nerve, but I can fix phantom limb pain. That's so far, knock on wood, we only have 5 or 6 cases, but we've never failed with phantom limb pain. It's just like, it's easy. I teach it at the core level. It's fairly straightforward once you put the neurology together. So I'll try anything except cancer. I'll try anything. And infection, right? In infection, there is a reason that God invented antibiotics and antifungals. There's a reason for those. Now you get on antibiotics and then comes treat me, see me, I can treat the long-term effects of chronic infection on your system, but I will not treat the infection. It's dangerous. Especially inflammation is how your body contains infection. It attacks it, it encircles it, it contains it. We have found from experience that the frequencies will override, like literally override, the signaling from the bacteria to your immune system that turns inflammation on. So we override it. We turn the inflammation off for 2 to 4 hours. In that 2 to 4 hours, the infection is off the leash and it gets worse. And then when the inflammation comes back, it's more painful and it's worse, but it's diagnostic. So somebody thinks that they have trigeminal neuralgia. I treat inflammation in the nerve and it gets it worse. You got an infected tooth. Oh yeah, I've got a root canal up here. I said, no, you've got osteonecrosis up there. We treat for infection. When we treat with the frequencies for infection, the pain goes down. Then it's infected. Go get it fixed, then come back and see me. lady that had asthma. She was 57. She got asthma when she was 17 after a bad bout of bronchitis. She had a very wet kind of asthma, lots of coughing. And we started running fibrosis in the bronchi, and she coughed up this chunk of green stuff. And it's like, geez, Louise, how did your asthma start? Infection. We ran the frequency for catarrhal toxin and catarrh in the bronchi. Her asthma, she coughed up some more green stuff. Her asthma went away for a couple of hours. And I said, you have a chronic infection. You are to go home, get yourself on antibiotics for 4 to 6 weeks, and use FSM to help with the signaling. And then we can treat the inflammation. But you haven't. So the response to infection is diagnostic. It's not bad news. It's news. It's like, oh, okay. So those are the things we don't treat.
Interesting. And Marcy is talking, asking about neuroplasticity, autism, dyspraxia.
And what was it? Dyslexia?
Dyspraxia.
What does dyspraxia mean?
I don't know. Marcy?
Are you still there? Well, okay, so neuroplasticity is on our side. So treating a 30-year-old that had she was 38, that had a stroke 3 years ago. She still has lots of nerve growth factors. She still has lots of growth hormone. She had a stroke because she had sleep apnea untreated, big adenoids and tonsils. And she was easy to fix. It was easy. You treat a 75-year-old who had a stroke 10 years ago, and there's less nerve growth factor because they can't or won't exercise, and they're 75, not 38. And so there are more, we can change the symptoms, and there's still neuroplasticity, but it takes longer and it's harder. You learn a lot about what we call the stable state. You have to have the functional medicine approach to support. So FSM can create changes in cell signaling virtually instantly. Like it's crazy. But in order to maintain those changes, you have to do supplements or antibiotics. So at this last webinar, seminar, this live stream, Visceral, I treated a naturopath who is arguably one of the US experts on SIBO. And she's had SIBO since she was 7 years old. So 45 years. And I said, how did you get SIBO when you were 7 years old? She said, well, I had food poisoning. Ah, and then because she's an expert, I said, what bacteria? Oh yeah, there's the dyspraxia is a brain-based motor disorder. Oh yeah, that's easy. That's like treating a stroke. It's just part of the brain that's not wired right. You just put it in. It's totally doable. Anyway, so the SIBO, as we started treating her, the frequencies that worked were the ones that she told me for E. coli. And it's like, okay, so E. coli, we have like 6 frequencies for E. coli. One of them took away her gut pain. It's like, okay, you still have an infection. And we traced it all over her belly, treated her vagus nerve for that. Now, is the E. coli actually still there? Maybe. Or has the E. coli changed signaling? And what we're doing is normalizing the signaling in the gut and the vagus nerve. Which is it? And so the frequency response teaches you that. So you run E. coli in the vagus and a little nice stuff happens, but then you run scarring in the vagus and her whole belly turns to pudding. And you go, oh, okay. Well, vagus has been inflamed, it gets scarred. Yeah, that makes sense. So the frequency response teaches you what's going on in the body, because the frequencies will do what they will do, whether that is your intention or not. If you dissolve scar tissue, use that frequency at a point when it's inappropriate. So 4 weeks after the accident or the surgery, you start dissolving scar tissue. your intention is to help, but that patient will get worse. I've done it. So when I teach, it's not possible for you to make a mistake I haven't already made. It's right. So I will warn you about every side effect, every bad effect I've ever seen. So now you know the common mistakes. You may invent a new one on your own. Just let me know and I'll teach that one too. So we should do this again. This is really fun.
Oh, absolutely, Dr. Carolyn. I would absolutely love to do a part 2 if you're up for that.
Yeah.
That would be so good. But I sort of feel that we need 90 minutes and to wrap up now. But I want to thank you enormously. And yes.
One more thing, short, I promise to say though, is your people are all similar age to me. And it's never too late. So I'm 73. And because of the change in my travel schedule, like I don't get to travel anymore. It's like, oh, goody, I want a PhD in neuroscience. So in a year and a half, when the rest of the business cycle settles down and we get used to doing it all live stream, I will start on a PhD in neuroscience. So you can do anything you want to do if your brain and your heart will lead you down that path and you commit to it. So
absolutely. That's just a brilliant place to complete today. Thank you so much, and thank you to everybody for coming along and participating. And honestly, Dr. Carolyn, I'm just so grateful that you came to us. And yes, let's do a part 2 if you're up for it. That'd be fantastic.
We'll settle the date and time by email. But thank you for finding me. This was just delightful.
Brilliant. I love the hair, by the way.
Oh, do you see?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about time.
Brilliant. Well, lots of love to you and lots of love to everybody else. And yes, let's talk again soon, Dr. Carolyn.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.